In an earlier video, I did a JavaScript demo of the OAuth 2.0 implicit flow. After having written that code, in hindsight, I realized that I could have done a little better. I could have done a few things better, and so this is my attempt to refactor that code. The first is removing all global state. I realized in hindsight that we still have this app object, which is a global object, and what we do is in this document.ready event handler, we pass this object to this page class constructor function, and then the page class passes this around to every function that it has inside it, which is all okay, but then there's no point of having this global object, and I generally hate global state. It's generally a bad idea to have global state lying around, especially if it's mutable, as in this case it is. So I would like to remove this and make it local to this function. And in true JavaScript style, I'll change the bracing. So we have a document.ready which declares a local app object now, which is passed to this page constructor, which passes it around wherever, and we don't care about all that stuff. So that's the first thing I wanted to do. The second thing is, this is all like a huge blob of code, a monolithic class. I'd like to refactor this into separate files. So I'd have a page class. I want to have a page class in a separate file. So this is just going to be the index, and then I'll have a separate file called maybe page.js, which I'll save in the same directory over here. I'll call it page.js. And this page had a URL object, and the URL had some more properties. So I would like to refactor that URL object as well outside of this page class. Here's this URL. Then the URL has a params property, and it has a get error message function method, and then it has a get access token method and a search method, and that's about it till here. The rest of the functions are of the page class, so I would like to remove all of this and refactor it into a separate class file that has just the URL object. And what I'm going to do is make this a separate class with a constructor function. So I'll say URL equals function, and that takes a URL, and that basically has a URL property that sets, instead of this guy, I will have the URL passed around from the page class. So the page class would now say this dot URL equals new URL with window.location.href. That makes it a little better. And then I'm going to move all the functions that are there on this object. They were earlier on the object. Now I have a class. I'm going to move them to the prototype of this URL class. So first let me decrease the indent, and then I'll just say, instead of this dot URL, this will now become URL dot prototype dot this. I will do all that. I'll do the same thing to all of these objects, to all of these methods. Let's just make sure I haven't left any method. That's the search method, get access token method, get error message method, and params property. This looks a bit neat rather than that one. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the page class. I'm going to move all of these functions outside the body of the page class. There's a display function, and there's a display login URL, display welcome message, all the way up to get user, which ends here. So the page class looks much tidier now, and I'll move all of this outside and decrease the indent, and then I'll move all of these to the prototype of the page class. The prototype has a display function, and it has a display login URL, display welcome message, get login URL, this guy, and this guy. Now I'm just going to review all the code just to see if any references to the this pointer have been broken, and if generally the code is supposed to work as it did earlier. So let's just look for this anywhere. This is a function expression, and so when this gets read by the JavaScript interpreter, it'll first just create a function expression and associate it with this property on the prototype of the page class. It won't actually execute the function until it is called in the document.ready function. So when this is called in the document.ready, that's the time it's going to get a scope or a context, and that's the time this is going to become the context within which it is executing. So this is going to be the page class object that it is executing under, and the page class does have a URL property, so this should be fine as long as this guy is fine. So this is contingent upon this guy's constructor executing without any errors, which I will in a while try and see if there is any error in that. Then this becomes, this reference is fine, and this .url reference is fine, and this .url reference is fine, and this is fine, and this should be fine because I have a get user function at the very bottom of this in the same class. So I don't have anything spectacularly complicated in this class. I think all of this should just work seamlessly without any more changes. This is a local app reference. It's a local variable that was received as an argument, and I don't see anything complicated. The one last thing I'd like to do is, I don't like this name that, so I'd change it to something more useful. This over here represents the page object, so I'll call it the page and say the page.user is data. That's about it for this class. Let's go and check this guy, the URL. In fact, first let me save this file as url.js. Now the first function is an iffy, which is going to execute itself. Let me just remove this bind guy for a minute. So this is an iffy that's going to execute itself right now, and that's the difference between a function or a value like this and that's executing itself right now and evaluating to something, which is the return value, which is this p object, which is a simple object over here, versus something like this, which is simply a function expression that will be lazily executed when and if at all this get error message is called. At this moment, when the compiler, the JavaScript interpreter reads this, it's just going to create a function expression and associate it with this property on the prototype object. It's not going to execute this until this is called, and if at all it is called, it'll then execute the stuff. And when it does execute this stuff, this will then point to the URL object because it will be executing on its prototype. So this will be the URL object, and this URL will have a params property because I'm declaring it here. So this I think is fine, and so is this, because this will have a params. An app will also have a params because it's being passed here, and pattern will be this.url, this being the URL, the capital URL class. Classes object does have a URL property, and so that should be fine, which is of type string, and so this should also be fine. The only problem I see here is with this guy. This is going to return a vanilla object, and so and we are executing it right now. We're not executing it. We're not attaching a function expression that is to be executed later within the context of this class. We are executing right now. We are executing it right now over here. And at this time when it is executing this object at this point, if I just write a redundant dot bind this, which is totally redundant, but just to tell you that this actually points to global object, which in this case, since we're running it in the browser, is the window object. So I see a problem with this guy being outside this class, being outside this constructor function. One way is to not make it an iffy and have a function expression like so. But if I make this a function expression, this will right now just get attached, and this will become a function expression which I will have to use like a function and call with a parenthesis. So I'll have to change any references to params here or anywhere else, which is a huge pain in the neck. Over here, you see, I've indexed params. I need to first change it like a function and then index the return value of that function, which I don't want to do, so I would leave it as an iffy. The only way then to have this, I don't know how to have it, so if anyone has an idea of how I can have this guy outside of this constructor function. Okay, one way I can think of is to pass some kind of a state here, which is a pointer to the URL, big URL class object here. Somehow, somehow call this function expression that params points to with a self-reference that is with this. But that's going to get ugly, and I don't like. You see, I hate this language. That's the reason I hate this language. I can't. Don't even get me started. I hate it because also there's no concept of namespaces. What if somebody else had a URL class in the same very large project? I'd be totally screwed. So I would like to have some namespaces, and the only way I can have another a concept of namespaces is to have another containing object, and then do everything in the context of that object, which gets even messier and uglier. And I really don't know who are these programmers who like this stupid, this language. This is such an ugly language. It has no semblance of anything to do that helps the programmer just look at the code and realize what's going on. And I think the only joy or thrill that JavaScript programmers who really like JavaScript, if they were to be honest with themselves, they get is from the devious feeling that, we get it and you don't. I think that's the source of their thrill, because as it grows on you and as you keep doing more of it, you kind of get the knack of it. But it's still, if you were to be very objective and take a third-party standpoint or a viewpoint, this language is so unreadable and so not good to read. It's okay to write, but it's so not good to read. Anyway, let me get out of my rant mode. So if anybody has any ideas of how I can retain this guy outside of this constructor function, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. But for now, I'm going to move this back to this guy like so. Like it was. It looks a little uglier. It's not as neat as I would have liked it to be, but at least it'll work. The other thing I need to do is bind this inside of this to this.url, because now if I didn't bind it, this here would mean the URL caps URL class constructor. So I would bind it to this.url, and hopefully then this should start pointing to the string, this guy. I guess that's about it. Let's try and run the code. Let me just see. And I like to terminate everything with a semicolon every statement with a semicolon, and since this is a statement, I'm a bit of a Puritan, so that's that. And then page class is also done. I guess it should work now, except I need to go and attach 2 more script tags over here to include I first need to include the URL because the page is dependent on the URL, then the page.js, and then the index.js, and that's about it. Let's run this code. Okay, and if I click this, I go here, and wow, it works. And just to show you, this is not some hocus pocus. This is the developer tools. The console doesn't have any errors, and the attached files are the ones that we just made. Okay, that's nice. It worked the first time. I'm a little surprised, but that's about it. See you again with another interesting video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm still looking for a solution to this guy. So if you know how to get this guy outside of the constructor function over here, and still be able to reference the actual object that's going to be the URL object, then please leave a comment.